Welcome to Almost Here, Round the Corner Future Technology podcasts with Richard Jacobs. Future technologies poised to transform our lives for better or worse are the focus of this podcast. Almost here means these technologies are now here and starting to be used, or just around the corner, from Bitcoin to artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more. Coming to Dallas, Texas, September 14th, 15th, and 16th, 2018, the Blockchain and Future Tech Expo. This is going to be a gigantic conference of over 5,000 people. We're going to be talking about blockchain and its applications. We're going to be talking about quantum computing, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and several other future technologies that are poised to and actually changing our lives as we speak. Here's why you should attend. As you may know, early adopters are the ones that investigated and profited from things like the gold rush in the 1800s, from the dot-com boom in the 1990s, from the internet boom in 2005, from the smartphone explosion in 2007, from the real estate boom that ended in 2008, and of course, from the Bitcoin boom that started in 2012. Early adopters act now. They don't wait till later. They go out west first. In their covered wagons, they find the biggest gold nuggets. If you consider yourself an early adopter and you want to find the biggest nuggets, then you owe it to yourself to attend this upcoming conference. Blockchain is going to affect how we control and store our medical data, how we send money around the world, how we bank, and more. But artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and cybersecurity will play a pivotal role in our lives as well. And that's why our next event, September 14th to the 16th at the Dallas Convention Center, is going to have not only 5,000 plus attendees, but will showcase blockchain, AI, cybersecurity, quantum computing, and more. You want to get in on the coming gold rush of future tech and opportunity as an early adopter. Don't be left out. To register, go to bftexpo.com. That's blockchainfuturetechexpo.com. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Future Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Juliette Lamar, and my guest today is Colin Gounden. He is the president and CEO at VIA. Hi, how are you, Colin?
Very well. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Juliette.
Of course. Well, why don't you start us off with introducing us to VIA?
Terrific. VIA has a sole focus in the energy space. We provide machine learning and AI solutions to help the transmission and distribution of electricity throughout the world. More recently, one of the things that we've found in trying to provide AI solutions to the utilities industry is that a lot of data turns out to be trapped behind firewalls and behind a lot of security concerns. And so we have a brand new blockchain application called Trusted Analytics Chain that we're just launching that helps provide access to a lot of data behind firewalls in a very secure and anonymous way. And so that's a new application for us. But we're in the software space and targeting energy.
Excellent. So when you're saying that AI in regards to energy, you're talking about artificial intelligence, and how exactly is that all working together?
So, the energy industry spends over $100 billion a year to maintain and upgrade the infrastructure that provides electricity to our homes. So, they say if the internet goes out, it's like going back to 1979. But if electricity goes out, it's like going back to 1879. We're dependent on we're super dependent on electricity for basically everything, power. And we're at a moment in time when a lot of the infrastructure related to the transmission and distribution of electricity is getting old. In the United States, for example, something like the average age of transformers is something like 50 years. And the average lifespan of transformers is supposed to be 40 years. So we're way over.
Oh, good.
In terms of exactly. It's a good news scenario. Right? The good news, there is good news, and the good news is that basically, we're at a moment in time where there's a lot of pent up demand for improving the infrastructure and for investment in infrastructure, and so there's a lot of renewal that's happening. And the question is, even if you say, well, we're going to replace everything, you can't do it all at once. So where do I start? How do I decide, which transformer to replace, or which transmission tower, or which circuit, or which switch? And that's a good job or a good task for artificial intelligence or machine learning to kind of learn some rules about, well, where do I think there are issues, and where do I think the most likely outages are going to occur, and let's start there. So it's using AI and machine learning as a prioritization tool, essentially, to help in upgrading and maintaining that vast infrastructure. They say that the U.S. electric grid is possibly the most advanced or most complex piece of machinery ever built. It's interconnected everywhere and over 100 years old. So figuring that out and decomposing that's it's a tricky task.
I think a lot of people don't put much thought into where the electricity comes from, and then when it's gone, everyone starts freaking out. It's something that everyone should really be interested in and know what's happening with it, because it does run our entire life. Everything. Yeah. And we're in a moment in time, sort of we have two things happening sort of simultaneously. Well, three things. One is the aging infrastructure I mentioned. Now you have a second thing, which is we have a lot more extreme weather. So, I'm based in Boston, and here in March, it's still, below freezing and at the end of March. And we just had last week our fourth big storm, snowstorm of March, never mind the whole winter. And that's that wreaks havoc on the electricity and the grid. And, it's a big, we're seeing more and more of these extreme weather events, and that's taking its toll. And the other is, of course, we're changing how we use electricity. It's not just the small devices that we, that we use for, creating podcasts and listening to podcasts, but it's also the big devices. So, all of the transformers that are all in the neighborhoods in, around the United States, they were all designed to, they get hot as they work during the day, and they were designed to cool off at night. And a thing we're starting to see is a lot more electric vehicles on the road, and those electric vehicles come back to the houses at night. They get plugged in, and now there's a lot more drain on the grid at night. So the transformers don't cool off like they were intended to, and then they blow. And then they have and so we're in trying to do the right thing, which is moving to green and electric vehicles. We actually sometimes create we have unintended consequences of that, and it's forcing us to be proactive and really invest in upgrading the infrastructure here in the U.S. and abroad too. Exactly. I think a lot of people just assume that because you're driving a Prius means that you are not impacting the environment, when in fact there are still several things that do impact the environment. Say the batteries, where do they go when they're done? Or with the Teslas, when you plug in, yes, you're not using fossil fuels, but now you're using electricity, and everything is a give and take, and it's just where we want to shift that give and that take.
Yeah, exactly, and as the so it's a good task for it's one of those things though where you'd say it's tricky, but it can be managed, and and we also the good news is we also have lots of information to be able to help us manage that well, but it requires more software to be able to to deploy, to be able to kind of keep up with all of this changing demand and the new world order in terms of how electricity is being used and where it's being used.
Would the AI solutions at all make it safer for, say, people who are working, like linemen who are actually out there working with the electrical things and fixing things? Would the AI that you are working with essentially create a safer environment for those type of workers?
Yes, that's actually the primary reason that we've seen the initial interest in this area. So, we talk about power outages and transmission equipment and predicting failure in these areas, but thankfully it doesn't happen that often. It's a very rare event, actually, even in the grand scheme of things. And our first customers were actually in Japan. So Tokyo Electric Power Company is the fourth largest utility in the world, and they were the first customer that we started sort of deploying predictive maintenance solutions with on transmission equipment. And for them, it wasn't really the cost savings because actually Japan has the lowest minutes of outage per year of any industrialized nation.
Oh wow!
So it was So it really wasn't that they had a lot of outages like the U.S. It's actually the opposite. They had very, very few. But when it goes wrong, people are at risk. So the towers are very high. And if a transformer blows or if a piece of equipment goes, it's an explosion. Generally, it's the equipment catches fire or something happens, and if there are people nearby, it's life threatening. And so for them, it was very much a people and safety issue more than a cost issue.
And because you were essentially, for saving people's lives is a very moral and good thing to jump on board with, for sure.
Right, exactly. It was hard to, hard to say no to that mission, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, everybody is interested, I think, in saying, well, what's the ROI for these solutions? And of course, you can calculate the ROI in lots of ways, whether that's, reduced fines or reduced customer complaints or, the number of minutes the power stays on. But, ultimately, if you're able to save someone's life, that's the highest ROI you can ask for.
Oh, 100%. So when someone comes to you and they want your services, walk us through what different things you offer.
So generally, right now we're engaged with a number of the leading utilities in Europe and in Asia and in the United States, and the key regulatory bodies. And usually what we've done is start with a piece of equipment where they would say, look, this is something that we know we are going to have to replace a lot of, or we know we're struggling to find a way to keep up with sort of the replacement cycle, or figuring out where best to, how best to assess the risk of which piece of this, which kind of equipment might fail, and can you help us identify high risk equipment versus low risk equipment, and then that usually we do put together what we call a vision and value statement. So the vision statement says, is literally a storyboard, in the same way you might create a storyboard for a movie that you're creating. The storyboard is, or the vision is, in 1 year or 2 years, if we were very, very successful, what would this look like? In here, it's not about what would a software system look like, but what change would occur in the organization? What would be different? Maybe it would be lives saved, right? And how would lives be saved? Because we identified this piece of equipment in advance, and here's how that happened. Here's the decisions that were made. And then from there, we kind of work backwards and say, okay, well, if that may not be the starting point, but that's where we're going on this path. So then let's work backwards and figure out what would be the right 4-week, 8-week, 12-week, 16-week kind of proof point to say, to give us enough confidence that if we develop this, we would get, we could realize that vision. So that's sort of the starting point in how we like to work with companies. We feel like there's a little bit of importantly, there's some buy-in that's in that process, where people are, they're not just signing up to say, well, I want to try some software, but they're signing up to say, well, I think this is where the industry is going. I think this is the change that we need at our organization, and we're part of that creation process with.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a whole ongoing problem-solving type of work.
Yeah. Well, and that's led us to something that's been very interesting for us, which is we found that in the ideal world, a company would say, well, here's we want to identify when transformers at in plants, or transformers at on the transmission lines, or at different substations are going to fail. And, here's our data. Can you help us identify, the high-risk transformers versus the low-risk transformers? What we found is that a lot of companies getting access to that data is incredibly hard because they, essentially it's not confidential. You can, you're really talking about a national security asset. If Russian hacking, right, or pick your thing, like your story of the day, right, about security risks, about this kind of information. And the other is that in the ideal world, you would have a lot of incidents of failure to analyze. And as we said earlier, it turns out that these things don't fail that often. And so really in the ideal world, in order to get more of these examples of failure to learn from, and you would you'd want to share that data across companies, and that's very, very difficult in this secure, the information security environment we live in. And so we actually have been, we recently won through an accelerated group of sizable $1 million grant to develop a new application that we're now in the process of beta testing with a number of companies around the U.S. and some key regulatory bodies around the ability to analyze data from multiple organizations without having them to actually physically aggregate that data. So in the case of transformers, well, no single company in Kansas or Missouri or Mississippi and Georgia have enough examples of transformer failure independently, but if you were to, pool the examples of failure amongst them, you would get enough data to actually make the AI and machine learning work. And so finding ways to kind of, essentially we've developed a way to allow that sharing of data for AI and machine learning to work without having to actually physically aggregate it. And so each party also keeps their data anonymous and private. So that's sort of a big that's been another one of those client-led or problem-led areas. We until we started getting into the business, we didn't know that was a thing that needed really to be created.
Yeah, it's a lot of trust that you're asking of people.
Yeah. And and I think the key is if you can, in the ideal world, if you can trust the party, if you could say, trust me, just give me your data, I'll solve the problem, that would be great. But if you want you want trust across a lot of parties, the ideal is that you're able to have some kind of software system that, I don't need to trust you to know that the right things are happening. I can give you I've given this presentation or analogy to both government regulators as well as big utility companies, where I don't know if you recall the band Van Halen from the 1980s, and they had there's a famous story where in the Van Halen contract, when they went on tour, there always needed to be a bowl of M&Ms at the in the dressing room that had all the brown M&Ms removed, and it was kind of the apocryphal story about rock stars and divas and why they all had these absurd requests. And as it turns out, I make the claim that actually that story actually is true, and actually Van Halen actually had better security than the energy industry today. And the reason is, it turns out that the band, went on tour, and they had a huge set of equipment. They were one of the largest touring bands at the time. And one time they had an accident where the equipment, although it was specified very clearly in the contract, the equipment was set up incorrectly when they went through it. And what they did is they put in their contract that M&Ms needed to be in the dressing room with the brown ones removed, and if it wasn't there, then basically they could you forfeit the contract. And the reason why they put that in is any member of the band could walk into the dressing room, they could see the M&Ms, and if the M&Ms weren't there or if the brown ones weren't removed, they know someone didn't read the contract, and therefore not only are the M&Ms not there, but maybe the equipment's not set up correctly, right? It's a preventative measure to be able to understand. And what we have in the energy industry actually today is when we're thinking about sharing data or sharing information, or the contractual agreements are really about, if you break them, you will be penalized, but there's no preventative measure. Right, and actually, what we're doing is using sort of smart contracting systems or others, is that we're bringing in these preventative measures where it's hard. You can't, you don't actually need to trust the other party. I have a test to see whether people have done or are doing the right thing, and I can prevent them. I can prevent an accident, which is what Van Halen was trying to do, right, by having the M&M. We can prevent information security issues as opposed to waiting until, something happens and then trying to, get retribution or, a resolution after the fact. So this is a big, it's part of a sort of an ethos of trying to move to more preventative measures in the industry overall.
Of course, it's much easier to fix a problem that hasn't happened yet. Instead of cleaning it up after the fact. Exactly. An ounce of prevention, sure. Exactly. So besides learning so much about the intricacies of sharing information and the need for prevention, what else have you learned through working with this energy industry in VIA taught you?
Well, I think one of the key learnings that we've seen in the industry, other than the need for prevention, is this is actually tends to be a very collaborative industry, and despite the fact that it's very this is about electricity, right? So this is about engineering, right? It's about wires, cables, it's about the movement of electrons, but despite all the equipment and all the physics that's involved, really people make the final decision about whether the electricity will flow and whether and whether you have power or not. And one of the things we've seen is it doesn't really matter how good you think your software might be, or how good you think your algorithms are, or how well finessed your math is. Really, or elegant your algorithm, the math might be. Those are important things, but they're not the things that actually will matter in the industry. What matters is people, as you kind of alluded to, you have some trust and credibility, and people, the operations and maintenance people in these organizations, will make a decision about whether to go repair a certain, piece of equipment, or whether to send a truck out to go inspect something, not based on, the algorithm said there's a 0.85 chance that, something will happen. But if they believe that there's they believe the system, or they believe the explanation behind it. And, we've one of the other areas that we've seen that's been really important in getting credibility in this industry is going beyond the statistical prediction of a percentage or a decimal to say, here's what, a risk level of 0.2 versus 0.8, but providing some specific explanations about, or human readable and understandable explanations about why we think such a, something is happening. So the case that, Japan, Japan is an island, and, we looked at all sorts of factors related to what drives predictions, and one of the things we came up with was being able to say, well, this piece of equipment will fail or we think is at risk, and that's because it's close to the sea, right? And corrosion is happening to the salt water. And this other piece of equipment is inland, and it's not the distance to the sea, it's the age, or it's the sulfur dioxide, the pollution levels. It's next to a factory, right? That's what's driving it. And we found that that it wasn't enough to have just the math or the mathematical equation, but it was important to have that follow-on explanation to make to make sure that someone took action as a result of the prediction. So that's been a big learning for us.
You're all about prevention, prediction, and problem solving.
Nice, yeah. I'm gonna use that.
Prediction and prevention create a safe environment. That's fantastic. So I'm looking here on your website, and you say it's got a countdown for 2 days, 16 hours, and 33 minutes. What is happening?
Oh, but if I can't tell you. No.
Well, everyone's gonna have to go to the website then and check it out.
Exactly. We have a big brand launch, so we are rebranding we have some surprises coming up in a couple of days. So I'm sure by the time this airs, that may not, that countdown may have gone. But we have both. We've had a very sort of simplified web presence, which was mainly focused on content, so a lot of blog content and a lot of articles. We've been lucky enough to have a lot of news articles about what we're doing, and recently featured in Inc. magazine and Wired last year. And but now we're also need to provide a little bit more detail about who we are, what we're doing, and the solution. So all of that is coming in a couple of days.
Fantastic, exciting things on the horizon. Where is the best place for people to connect with you? Is it through the website viascience.com?
Yes, that'd be great. info@viascience.com. We'll provide a way to get to us.
Excellent. This has been so much fun, Colin, and eye-opening at the same time. I don't know if I'm scared that we're got these problems going on, or really excited that you're on top of it.
Hopefully both. It's a shot in yeah, right? We've got both. Be a little scared but excited at the same time. I think the good news is there's I always say with great power comes great responsibility. Actually, I'm pretty sure that's Spider-Man, not me. But I think what we know that there's a lot of there's taking care of the grid is an enormous responsibility, and but we think with great with the right opportunity, the right software, the right technology, actually, there are lots of ways that we can hopefully make the grid safer than ever before. So. Exactly.
And, on this podcast, we talk about a lot of different technologies and the future of the world and everything. But it all comes down to if we have electricity or not. Because if we don't have electricity, that future does not exist.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very basic infrastructural thing, but it's critically important. Sometimes we always forget the basics, but it has to be there. So, and especially as we said, with all the changes in climate and the way we're using electricity, and and we didn't even touch on distributed energy, solar and wind, and how that's impacting the grid as well. So all kinds of things are at play here. So it's an important time to be on top of the issues related to power and power distribution.
100%. Well, Colin Gounden, thank you so much for joining me here on Future Tech Podcast. This has been very eye-opening.
Thank you. My pleasure. And I wish you the best, and thank you very much for having me on the show.
Take care, Colin. This has been Juliette Lamar with Future Tech Podcast. Thanks for listening in.
Coming to Dallas, Texas, September 14th, 15th, and 16th, 2018, the Blockchain and Future Tech Expo. This is going to be a gigantic conference of over 5,000 people. We're going to be talking about blockchain and its applications. We're going to be talking about quantum computing, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and several other future technologies that are poised to and actually changing our lives as we speak. Here's why you should attend. As you may know, early adopters are the ones that investigated and profited from things like the gold rush in the 1800s and the dot-com boom in the 1990s. from the internet boom in 2005, from the smartphone explosion in 2007, from the real estate boom that ended in 2008, and of course, from the Bitcoin boom that started in 2012. Early adopters act now. They don't wait till later. They go out west first. In their covered wagons, they find the biggest gold nuggets. If you consider yourself an early adopter and you want to find the biggest nuggets, then you owe it to yourself to attend this upcoming conference. Blockchain is going to affect how we control and store our medical data, how we send money around the world, how we bank, and more. But artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and cybersecurity will play a pivotal role in our lives as well. And that's why our next event, September 14th to the 16th at the Dallas Convention Center, is going to have not only 5,000 plus attendees, but will showcase blockchain, AI, cybersecurity, quantum computing, and more. You want to get in on the coming gold rush of future tech and opportunity as an early adopter. Don't be left out. To register, go to bftexpo.com. That's blockchainfuturetechexpo.com. Thank you. You have been listening to Almost Here, Around the Corner Future Technology podcast with Richard Jacobs. Subscribe to this podcast, post a review to discover more future technologies that are poised to transform our lives for better or worse, such as Bitcoin, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, blockchain, virtual reality, and more.